John Smith had made a home here with his teenage son, Max, carving out a future where the stars weren't just distant glimmers, but something humanity could call its own. It wasn't much, a patchwork of steel platforms, domes, and stubborn optimism, but it was theirs. John had never been a man to take orders blindly, and that included celestial bureaucrats who thought they could push around people like him. Years in the military had left him with a strong back and a sharper mind, but it was his fierce independence that made him truly dangerous. His son Max had inherited that fire in a different way, quieter, more reserved, but with an intensity that surfaced in the right moments. At 16, Max was all about old Earth movies, quoting Predator and Die Hard at every opportunity, convinced that the greatest warriors were the ones who made the best one-liners. They were working on repairing a power relay when the sky split open. The Galactic Empire's fleet did not arrive subtly. They did not hail, negotiate, or announce their presence with diplomatic grace. No, they arrived with authority, sleek, obsidian-black ships emerging from hyperspace, blotting out the sun with their sheer mass. The air vibrated as energy fields stabilized their descent, and within moments, the shadow of an imperial dreadnought stretched across the settlement. John wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his sleeve and muttered, "Well, that ain't good." Max, staring up at the behemoth above them, deadpanned. Dad? This is usually the part in the movies where the good guys start running." John gave him a lopsided grin. "Guess we missed that memo." The lead ship descended gracefully, its landing struts hissing as they made contact with the ground. A long metallic ramp extended, and out marched the Yenthri, the ruling species of the Galactic Empire. Their leader, Commander Salor, strode forward with the practiced arrogance of a being who had never lost a battle. Salor was tall, draped in shimmering blue robes that barely concealed the powerful exoskeletal armor beneath. His reptilian features were refined, his golden eyes surveying the colony with a detached interest of someone evaluating livestock. Behind him stood Lieutenant Gronk, a shorter, bulkier Yenthri who carried a datapad and the unmistakable look of someone trying very hard to appear competent. The colonists gathered, wary but unwilling to cower. John crossed his arms, standing at the front with Max beside him. Salor's gaze landed on him, as if he had already deemed him the leader of this insignificant cluster of humans. "I am Commander Salor of the Galactic Empire," he declared, his voice smooth polished, and carrying the weight of untold authority. "By decree of the Emperor, this territory is now under the jurisdiction of the Yenthri Dominion. All human inhabitants are to evacuate immediately." A hush fell over the crowd. Some shifted uncomfortably, others clenched their fists. John didn't move. He let the silence stretch a moment longer before replying, "Yeah, I don't think so." A flicker of confusion passed over Salor's face. "Perhaps I was not clear," he said. "You are trespassing on Imperial space. This settlement is in violation of—" John cut him off. "We built this place. No empire, no alien decree, no fancy little rulebook of yours had anything to do with it. You think you can just show up and claim what we've bled to make? Buddy, I've had cable companies try to screw me harder, and I didn't roll over for them either." Gronk blinked at his datapad. Commander, I believe that was defiance." Salor's lip curled. "Indeed." He turned his gaze back to John, assessing. "Humans. Such primitive defiance is expected, though tiresome. Perhaps you fail to understand the consequences of refusal." John tilted his head. "Oh, I understand fine. You're going to wave some big fancy weapons around, threaten us, maybe even fire a few warning shots. But let me tell you something, lizard boy, Earth doesn't scare easy." Max grinned. "Yeah, we grew up with Jurassic Park, pal." Salor glanced at Gronk, who was furiously typing into his pad. "Jurassic Park," the commander repeated. Gronk hesitated. "A documentary, sir? Possibly of their past conflicts with reptilian species." John and Max exchanged a look before simultaneously bursting into laughter. Some of the colonists chuckled as well, emboldened by their leader's complete lack of fear. Salor, however, was not amused. "I see," he said coolly. "Very well then." He lifted a clawed hand and made a subtle gesture. The air shimmered. A pulse of energy crackled. Before John could react, a blast shot out from the alien weaponry. The world blurred. Max's grin vanished. And then he was gone. One moment, standing there, cracking jokes. The next, nothing. Just vapor. Just air where his body had been. John's brain struggled to comprehend it. His breath hitched. His heart stopped. A scream caught in his throat, but never escaped. The universe stood still. Then Salor turned his gaze to him. "You were saying?" John didn't feel himself move. His body did it for him. His fist met the Yenthri commander's face with a force that sent the alien stumbling back, golden blood splattering onto the dirt. The colonists gasped. The soldiers stiffened. John didn't care. Salor steadied himself, touching the fresh wound on his cheek with a stunned realization that he had bled at the hands of a human. His eyes flared with something dangerous. Gronk's data pad beeped. Commander," he said hesitantly. "It seems that was an official act of war." Salor exhaled sharply. "Then war it is." He gestured again. Another blast fired. John Smith vanished. The colony fell into chaos. People screamed, ran, scattered into the outpost corridors. Some tried to fight, but the Yenthri weapons cut through them like paper. The aliens moved swiftly, methodically, erasing all signs of human defiance in a calculated, merciless strike. By the time the last shot had been fired, Horizon 9 was nothing but a smoldering ruin. Salor turned to Gronk. "Send the transmission. Earth will know their kind is no longer welcome among the stars." Gronk nodded, tapping into the Empire's network. A live broadcast was sent across the vast human communication relays. It was simple, brutal. A still frame of John and Max Smith. And the words, "Justice has been served for imperial sovereignty." Then silence. But on Earth, the silence did not last long. The reaction was immediate. The moment the message reached humanity's networks, it exploded. News anchors struggled to keep up. Social media ignited. First, there was confusion. Then anger. Then something deeper. Something primal. A single video from an anonymous user spread like wildfire. It was simple, just a black screen with text. "They killed a father and his son. They wiped out an entire human colony. They think we will sit back and take it. They don't understand what happens when you push humans too far." It ended with a single phrase. "Earth is at war." The first message from the United Nations was not one of diplomacy, nor hesitation. It was raw, unfiltered rage, a single declaration that would go down in galactic history. You wanted war? You've got it. And somewhere in the vastness of space, an empire that had never feared anything in its long, merciless history felt something they never thought possible. Dread. The moment the message was broadcast across Earth, the world changed. It wasn't a slow shift, not the creeping tide of bureaucratic discussions and diplomatic hesitation that usually followed interstellar conflict. No, humanity did not deliberate. They did not bargain. They did not wait. They reacted. The video of John and Max Smith's execution played on repeat across every news station, every social media platform, every screen in every home. The world did not need time to grieve. Grief was for later. Rage came first. It started with a single chilling phrase spoken by President Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, his expression grim as he faced the planetary broadcast. His voice, steady as stone, carried the full weight of humanity's collective wrath. Lock and load. The world erupted. The first to respond were the military forces. The U.S. Space Force, once considered more of a joke than a necessity, was suddenly the most important branch of Earth's defense. The Air Force, Navy, and Army scrambled into action, retrofitting everything that could possibly function in space. Aircraft carriers were launched into orbit. Fighter jets were refitted for interstellar combat. But it wasn't just governments. Private corporations leaped in with reckless abandon. Elon Musk, who had been in cryogenic sleep for decades awaiting a proper Martian colony, was thawed out specifically for the occasion. SpaceX engineers, fueled by caffeine and unhinged determination, took control of NASA's outdated programs and revived them overnight. Jeff Bezos, not to be outdone, immediately diverted all Amazon shipping routes into weapon supply lines. His PR team struggled to explain why 2-day shipping was now 2-hour interstellar bombardment. The civilians weren't far behind. The internet was flooded with recruitment campaigns, but Earth's true enlistment didn't happen in offices. It happened in basements, where hackers began dismantling the galactic empire's digital security. It happened in garages, where mechanics turned junkyard scrap into makeshift orbital defenses. It happened on every street, where people painted their homes with the words, "Remember the Smiths." One group, however, rose above the rest. They called themselves the 80s Battalion. No one knew exactly how it started, but somewhere in the depths of Reddit and military forums, a coalition of action movie enthusiasts, ex-Marines, and dangerously underemployed engineers united under a single cause: to bring war to the stars with the spirit of every Schwarzenegger, Stallone, and Willis film ever made. Their weapons? Improvised railguns mounted onto classic muscle cars. Their strategy? What would John McClane do? Their anthem? The Top Gun soundtrack. By the time the first human fleet left Earth's orbit, they were more than just a military force. They were a reckoning. The first target was Mars. The Galactic Empire, believing humans to be underdeveloped and incapable of interstellar retaliation, had stationed a modest fleet over the Red Planet. It was a defensive oversight of catastrophic proportions. The Yenthri command ship, hovering above Mars's thin atmosphere, barely had time to register the incoming vessels before chaos arrived. The initial assault was unconventional by all galactic standards. The Yenthri had expected missile barrages, perhaps a few desperate attempts at resistance. What they got was a fleet of spacefaring semi-trucks, fighter jets retrofitted with plasma cannons, and an aircraft carrier strapped with engines launching literal tanks into their ranks. The first human transmission to the Yenthri fleet was a single, distorted radio signal, a song, "Danger Zone" by Kenny Loggins. The Yenthri had no idea what it meant. Moments later, a Boeing 747, welded with enough thrusters to break orbit, slammed into their command bridge at full speed. The battle lasted only 27 minutes. The Yenthri, overwhelmed by human unpredictability, retreated in total disarray. When Earth's forces landed on the Martian surface, they found the Galactic Empire's ground troops completely demoralized. Some were crying. Others had their claws raised in surrender. One particularly traumatized officer kept muttering, They threw an entire restaurant at us." They were not wrong. At some point during the battle, an entire Waffle House had been detached from Earth's surface and fired at the enemy like an improvised projectile weapon. How? No one knew. But the fact remained. The first official space battle of humanity's history ended with the phrase, "Would you like syrup with that?" echoing through the Yenthri comms. The momentum did not stop. With Mars secured, the next target was Luna Station, the Empire's largest military base in the Sol system. But this time, the Yenthri were ready. Or so they thought. Earth's approach was different this time. Instead of an immediate strike, they hacked into the base's security systems, shutting down their automated defenses. The Yenthri, confused and alarmed, scrambled to restore control, only to find their screens flooded with an old Earth sitcom. Seinfeld, the base's commander, an aging Yenthri general, watched in confusion as the image of a human man in a puffy white shirt played on every screen. What is the deal with intergalactic trade taxes?" the man said. The Yenthri didn't understand the joke. Moments later, a battalion of human troops burst through the station doors, wielding improvised plasma rifles, baseball bats, and a startling amount of Molotov cocktails. The battle was not just a victory. It was a message. Earth was not here to merely survive. They were here to conquer. Back on the Yenthri homeworld, the High Council convened in absolute panic. This is beyond reckless," one minister stammered, watching footage of a human soldier single-handedly powerbombing a Yenthri captain off a lunar platform. "They have no strategy," another whispered. "No order. No discipline." "They are winning," the emperor growled. Silence. The truth was unavoidable. Every tactical analysis indicated that humanity should not have been able to mount such a resistance. Their weapons were crude. Their ships were outdated. Their forces were disorganized. And yet, the Galactic Empire was losing. Not because of superior firepower. Not because of numbers. But because the humans fought like lunatics. They did not adhere to standard battle doctrine. They did not surrender when outnumbered. They did not follow the carefully established laws of warfare. They flipped the entire rulebook off a cliff and went in swinging. Even worse, they were laughing the entire time. On the human warship USS Smith's Revenge, a squad of Marines prepared for the next engagement. One of them, a broad-shouldered man covered in old military tattoos, loaded his rifle with a smirk. "You know," he said, "I think the best part about all this is that these alien bastards still don't get it." A younger soldier raised an eyebrow. "Get what?" The Marine grinned, cocking his gun. "They messed with the wrong species." The human fleet gathered. Their next target? The Yenthri homeworld itself. And this time, they weren't just coming for revenge. They were coming to win. The Galactic Empire had fought wars before. They had crushed rebellions, subdued civilizations, and extinguished entire species that dared to challenge their rule. Their history was one of ruthless conquest, of cold efficiency, of absolute dominance over the lesser beings of the cosmos. The humans, however, were something else entirely. Reports from the front lines were scattered and impossible to categorize in traditional military records. The Yenthri Intelligence Division attempted to analyze human tactics, but they defied logic. Their war doctrine was chaotic, unpredictable, and, worst of all, horrifyingly effective. The first indication that things had spiraled completely out of control came when a Yenthri recon vessel intercepted a distress call from their own forces, an urgent, panic transmission from a battlefield on Titan. They aren't fighting like a normal species. The Yenthri officer's voice cracked with terror. They bite. They throw things. They use their own dead as cover, and then, oh stars, one just tackled me. The transmission cut out in static. A military strategist from the council analyzed another engagement and nearly lost his mind reading the battle report. A small squad of human soldiers had been cornered in a ravine, outnumbered 5-1. Any other species would have surrendered or attempted an orderly retreat. Instead, the humans lit themselves on fire and charged screaming into the enemy lines. The maneuver, later dubbed Florida Protocol, was deemed both strategically unsound and completely unstoppable. The Galactic Empire sent their most elite battalions to Earth's moon, hoping to reclaim their lost territory. But they found themselves in a war zone unlike anything recorded in galactic history. The human base was lined with billboards flashing insults in multiple alien languages. Some messages were clear taunts. "Come get some." Others were inexplicably cryptic. "If you invade Florida, we are legally required to warn you that our most dangerous individuals reside there." No one understood what a Florida man was, but the phrase sent chills through the Yenthri ranks. When the Empire's fleet descended upon Luna Base, they were prepared for a difficult fight. They had heavily armored shock troopers, aerial support, and siege-class walkers designed to crush any resistance. What they were not prepared for was a fleet of Mad Max-style battle wagons roaring across the lunar surface, firing Tesla coil cannons and blasting 80s rock music into the void. It was the first battle in history where a Chevy Impala with mounted railguns took down a heavily armored walker by jumping off a ramp and crashing into its cockpit. From orbit, the Yenthri fleet attempted an aerial bombardment, but they failed to anticipate the human strategy of hijack enemy weapons and turn them against their owners. Within hours, the Yenthri dreadnoughts found themselves under attack by their own ships, captured and crewed by horrifyingly enthusiastic human pilots. The battle became a comedy of errors for the Yenthri, but for the humans, it was just another day at war. The Galactic Empire still had one hope left, their ground invasion of Earth itself. They launched an armada, deploying thousands of dropships into Earth's atmosphere, targeting major cities first. The plan was to establish control over population centers, to strike swiftly and efficiently, to force the human leaders into surrender. The plan failed spectacularly. The Yenthri landed in New York first. This was a mistake. Within minutes of landing, their soldiers were immediately mugged by street gangs, overcharged for cheap watches in Times Square, and somehow, 3 platoons were stuck in subway turnstiles with no way out. A Yenthri commander, desperately trying to get through the chaos, attempted to use public transportation and was last seen being screamed at by an angry taxi driver. Then they tried Florida. This was an even bigger mistake. Within an hour, the invading force was chased into the swamps by men wielding machetes, homemade flamethrowers, and, at one point, an alligator named Rufus. A Yenthri scout attempted to report the situation, but was interrupted by a man in jorts slamming him through a picnic table while screaming, "Welcome to Earth, boy." The Yenthri did not attempt to invade Florida again. The council convened once more, desperate for answers. "They don't stop," a high-ranking officer muttered, rubbing his temples. "We outgun them. We outnumber them. And yet they continue." The emperor remained silent. He had been watching the footage of human soldiers wearing bright Hawaiian shirts while dual-wielding plasma pistols and taking down his best forces. Another officer shakily held up a captured human propaganda poster. It depicted a human astronaut crushing a Yenthri's skull under his boot, with the words, "We're going to take your planet and your MOM," written in bold text. "What does this mean?" the officer whispered. The emperor did not answer. He did not want to know. Meanwhile, on Earth, the human counterattack continued to escalate. Hackers completely dismantled the Galactic Empire's economic systems within days. Entire Yenthri military databases were deleted and replaced with clips from 80s action movies. An unknown hacker, now infamous across the galaxy, managed to infiltrate the Empire's main fleet AI and reprogram their emergency distress signals to play the theme from Rocky IV. The breaking point came when a human pilot, captured in a recent skirmish, was interrogated by the Yenthri Intelligence Division. He was brought before the Emperor himself, restrained, exhausted, and covered in blood, sweat, and barbecue sauce. The Emperor leaned forward. "What do you want?" The human grinned, revealing a row of pristine, suspiciously perfect teeth. "A rematch." The Emperor paled. The realization was finally settling in. This was not a war of land or resources. This was a war of pride, and humanity was enjoying every second of it. Across the Empire, panic spread. Civilizations that had once feared the Yenthri saw Earth standing strong, fighting against all odds and winning with sheer lunacy. The once feared Galactic Empire was losing. The Yenthri were the most advanced species in the galaxy, but they were not prepared for an enemy that thought war was a spectator sport. The Emperor, once confident in his superiority, now faced the horrifying reality. This was not a rebellion. This was not an insurgency. This was not a temporary conflict. This was humanity. And they were just getting started. It had been the shining jewel of the Galactic Empire for thousands of years, a sprawling metropolis of towering crystalline spires and technological wonders that had never known war. Its skies had only ever been darkened by ceremonial fleets, its streets never scarred by battle. It had been untouchable, unassailable, until today. Now, the once pristine avenues were choked with fire and smoke. Sirens blared in a panicked, disharmonic wail, warning of an invasion no one had thought possible. The sky above was filled with human warships, not elegant, not refined, but brutal and efficient, like flying fists ready to punch the Empire into extinction. The palace, the very heart of the Empire, stood under siege. The Emperor, the most powerful being in the known galaxy, the ruler of trillions, sat frozen in his throne, eyes locked onto the hollow screen, displaying the absolute insanity unfolding across his world. The humans had done what no species in history had dared. They had come straight to the capital, not with diplomacy, not with fear, but with an unstoppable, burning hunger for victory that no logic could contain. It was not strategy. It was pure, unrelenting, chaotic fury. On the battlefield, Captain James Reyes grinned as he sprinted through the shattered ruins of what had once been a Yenthri parade ground. plasma fire zipped past his head, scorching the air, but he didn't slow down. His boots crunched over shattered glass as he vaulted over an overturned alien hovercraft, landing with a roll before taking a knee and snapping off 2 precise shots. One Yenthri soldier dropped. Then another. Behind him, his squad surged forward, a ragtag mix of ex-Marines, volunteers, and a guy named Carl, who had apparently never served a day in the military, but had watched every single action movie ever made. Carl, grinning like a lunatic, dual-wielded alien rifles, and let loose a war cry that could curdle milk. For Earth. For freedom. For whatever, just shoot them. A massive explosion rocked the ground as a Yenthri assault vehicle was obliterated by an improvised human tank, a modified city bus with railguns strapped to its sides and a pair of miniguns mounted where the headlights should have been. The side of the bus had been painted with an Earth flag and the words, "Welcome to humanity, assholes." The Yenthri forces, once proud and disciplined, were breaking. They had spent their entire existence fighting wars by the book. They coordinated, they strategized, they followed protocol. They had never encountered an enemy that made it up as they went along, an enemy that fought like maniacs and laughed while doing it. A Yenthri officer clutched his communicator, his voice a strangled mix of panic and disbelief. We cannot contain them. They are unpredictable. We take their weapons, they throw rocks. We take their vehicles, they steal ours. We close our supply lines and he hesitated, shaking. They build their own out of stolen vending machines. The Emperor could not look away from the horror unfolding before him. These creatures, these humans, had no limits, no fear, no surrender in them. The throne room doors burst open. A human soldier strode in, his armor battered but proud, his rifle slung across his back. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had already won. Commander Marcus Steele locked eyes with the Emperor and smirked. "Hey, Your Majesty." He gestured toward the ruined city outside. "Nice place. Shame about the explosions." The Emperor, for the first time in his long reign, felt fear. "You." The words struggled to leave his throat. "You are monsters." Steele tilted his head. "Funny. That's what we were thinking about you when you vaporized a father and his kid." The Emperor flinched. The weight of that mistake, the single act of arrogance that had ignited this madness, now crashed down on him. The Empire had crushed thousands of species before. But humans? They were something different. They were stubborn, they were vengeful, and they had nothing to lose. Steele walked up to the throne and placed a single metal box on the Emperor's lap. The Emperor eyed it warily. The human grinned. "Go on. Open it." With shaking hands, the Emperor pressed the latch. Inside was a white cowboy hat. The Emperor's mouth went dry. A symbol. A final insult. John Smith's hat. The man they had killed like he was nothing. Steele's voice was calm, but behind it, there was a storm of righteous fury. "You took a man's home. You took his son. You thought we'd roll over. You thought you could break us." He leaned in, eyes like fire. "But you forgot something, didn't you?" The Emperor swallowed hard. Steele's smile widened. "We break back. The Emperor's will collapsed." He sank in his throne, defeated, humiliated, a ruler no longer in control. "You want terms?" Steele asked, turning away, already knowing the answer. The Emperor nodded without hesitation. Steele cracked his neck. "All right. First rule. You don't run this galaxy anymore. We do." Across the ruined capital, Yenthri generals dropped their weapons, realizing the truth. The war was over. In every conquered world, every enslaved race that had lived in fear of the Empire, screens flickered with a new message. Not a declaration, not a threat, just 3 simple words. Earth stands victorious. The Galactic Empire, the greatest force in the universe, had fallen. And humanity? Humanity was just getting started.